You're not going to be a dictator, are you? I said, no, 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 other than day one.
Donald Trump has successfully moved the Overton window in a way that is as dangerous for the future of democracy in this country as anything else.
This is what Vout and Project 2025 wanted.
He's daring Tom Homan to come and arrest him. Should he do it? I would do it if I were Tom. I think it's great.
They control the Congress, they control the White House, and they control the courts. And so, of course, they're massively overreaching. And yes, they are getting away with it right now.
This is clearly a man who cannot tolerate criticism of him or what he does, which is exactly what authoritarianism is all about.
The New York Times is just as fake as CNN and MSDNC. They really are the enemy of the people.
What he is saying, rather bluntly, if you stand up to Donald Trump, he will punish you.
Protesters in Philadelphia, state capitals in California, Minnesota, Michigan, Texas, Wisconsin, Indiana, and others showed up to oppose Trump, Musk, and Project 2025.
US and President Trump has overseen America's largest military parade in decades as nationwide protests take place against his leadership.
Demonstrations are happening right across the United States today to oppose the Trump administration.
Two visions of America. On a day the country's deepening divide was there for all the world to see.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. Show. You're watching Logically Left right here, YouTube, Facebook, Twitch. And boy, do we have a disastrous Monday show. Okay, because it was a disastrous weekend. I mean, we got babies literally getting like pepper sprayed in the face. Okay, that's one of the stories that I have today. Another day in Trump's America. But that doesn't mean that we need to be treating this as like normal, even though it's happening. Wow. Oh, okay. So yeah, I'm starting right out of the gate here with like the worst news imaginable. Look, we've got that. We've got Trump's new plan on affordability for a home. Lovely. Yeah. So we'll see how well that does. We've got the shutdown, obviously, Democrats caved. Of course, it's the so-called moderates that are doing it every single time. Look, Chuck Schumer, he voted no, right, to reopen the government. But, like, you can't have 8 members of the Democratic Party go and vote with the Republicans to reopen government without some sort of prior either agreement. Chuck Schumer saying, okay, you guys can go ahead and do that since you're not politically vulnerable, or they completely undermined him. I don't know. So either way, that's terrible. Okay. You got that. You got the Republican backdoor abortion ban, of course. And once again, another Trump voter has some regrets. I'm going to go over that as well. So, yeah, it's quite a day today. If you haven't already, please like and share the stream. With that said, why don't we dive into the first story here and talk about how, the Democrats pulled it again. As always. Looks like we've got ourselves another example of Democrats shooting themselves in the foot. Because of course. And funny enough, it's actually being criticized and pointed out by none other than Gavin Newsom, California's governor. Once again, not exactly someone who has been known for being a firebrand progressive or being particularly tough, although, to be fair, he has been tougher on Trump. In fact, he just called out the government shutdown deal as being a quote-unquote pathetic surrender. And honestly, he's got a point. Okay, look, for those who are not aware, okay, we have been living through the longest government shutdown in U.S. history, about 40 days, okay, during which 1.4 million federal workers either got fired or worked without pay. That sucks. Air travel had ground to a halt. SNAP benefits were delayed for 40+ million Americans. Classic Washington bullshit, right? But here's where it gets really interesting, okay? And by interesting, I mean absolutely infuriating, okay? Over the weekend, 8 Democrats decided to break ranks with Chuck Schumer and vote with Republicans to end the shutdown without getting anything in return. They got nothing. That's right, Jeanne Shaheen, Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, of course. You had Angus King in Maine, and then Dick Durbin, John Fetterman, Catherine Cortez Masto, Tim Kaine, Jackie Rosen. All of those people betrayed Democratic leadership, or maybe they didn't. Maybe there was like some sort of secret deal here. Maybe Chuck Schumer's like, no, you guys can go ahead since you're not up for re-election until like 2028, so you're not going to get any backlash for this. I don't know, but either way, they either betrayed Democratic leadership or were following orders, okay, and betrayed progressives and the millions of Americans who rely on healthcare. Now, you actually had progressive leaders, like, for example, Bernie Sanders, saying, no deal, no, we are not going to reopen the government until you extend the ACA subsidies. Not promise to extend them. Put the bill in front of us, in the budget bill. Put it in there, and we will vote for it. And we will reopen the government and extend the ACA subsidies at the same time. But no, Republicans didn't want to do that. Okay. So now, if anything, what happened is an indictment about Chuck Schumer's leadership or lack thereof. Either they didn't respect him because he was, voting no. And he's like, oh, we need to be strong. We know the whole line. Or, like I said before, there was like a previous or a secret agreement, okay, that they were making. Like, oh, go ahead. No, you can end the shutdown because, our donors in the airline industry are not too happy. And the airline industry, of course, being some of the country's biggest welfare queens, okay? I'm just saying. Look, progressives, though, were saying, hey, don't buy this, trust us, we'll get it done later bullshit. But it apparently, the moderates, so-called moderates, were like, no, we're going to do it anyway. You can trust Republicans when they tell you, that we're going to do it. We're going to have a vote, everybody. Yeah, no. Look, here's what this is all about, all right? It's not just about reopening the government, obviously. We're talking about the ACA premium tax credits, all right, that helped keep insurance a little bit more affordable for millions of Americans. Still not all that affordable, honestly, but could be a lot worse. I mean, there's a lot of Americans out there that currently have sticker shock every time they look at the new prices for 2026 on the exchanges, okay? Whew. Now, speaking of Newsom, right, why he's speaking up to about 2 million Californians alone depend on those subsidies, which expire in January 1st. And without them, again, you have premiums that are going to double, if not triple. Disastrous. So Newsom makes a point that is pretty crystal clear, right? The Senate deal will fund the government until January 30th, but he points out it makes absolutely no guarantee about extending the healthcare subsidies. Classic Washington move, all right? Kick the can down the road. But you got millions of Americans that will pay the price. Think about it this way. Democrats have spent about a decade trying to defend the ACA against Republicans' repeal and replace. Remember that? Remember that? They finally got Republicans on the defensive against healthcare, all right, or about healthcare, I should say. And now we're supposed to trust that the very same people who've been trying to destroy the ACA will negotiate in good faith if we just give them what they want by reopening the government. When was the last time Republicans actually came through on their side of any bargain? Again, they've been trying to repeal the ACA for over a decade. They've had more false starts than a college football team. All right. Why would they suddenly become reasonable in December when they couldn't be reasonable for the last 10 years at least? I mean, come on. I mean, seriously. Look, Democrats actually had leverage for now. Okay? The shutdown is absolutely destroying Republicans politically. The public blames them. Check the polling on that. And yet, why surrender then, if that's the case, the leverage that you have for promises that Republicans have a track record of breaking? Well, it's because we have 8 so-called moderate Democrats who think, oh, no, bipartisanship is more important than, winning. Think it's kind of weird. Same kind of centrist BS mentality that gives us Republican-like policies instead of actual bold progressive leadership. They're operating under the assumption that if you just give Republicans a chance to be reasonable, the fever will break. Remember Obama saying that? I do. Pepperidge Farm remembers. And guess what? Never broke. They will never end up being reasonable. And thinking that they will, I mean, you might as well think that, oh, yeah, no, Mitch McConnell's going to start supporting Medicare for all. Okay? That's what you sound like. Oh, no, the fever will break, and Mitch McConnell will finally realize that giving health care to everybody would be a great idea. It will help so many people. Yes, it would, but that's why Mitch McConnell doesn't want to do that. But anyway, back to Gavin Newsom. Again, he called this a pathetic surrender, and that's actually strategically correct and brilliant. Another rare W for Newsom. Obviously, if Republicans do not honor this agreement, this deal, and there is no vote, and those subsidies end up lapsing, because again, it's very likely that they will not honor this at all, then he'll be able to point to this and say, I saw this one coming. I called it out. He can also use this as a warning shot for other Democrats. Because, we know he's going to try and probably run for president. Let's be honest. But maybe that thinking he's going to be like, well, don't think that you can try to triangulate your way out of these things and get away with it. Progressives are watching. Democratic voters are watching. And look, Democrats are tired of leadership that caves at the first sign of any sort of political pressure. It's true. This whole situation highlights something that drives progressives like myself absolutely bonkers. The Democratic establishment has an addiction to reasonable compromise, even when it weakens our positions. Right now, we had the narrative on healthcare. Republicans are going to take your healthcare away. And that could have forced Republicans to either cave or own a prolonged shutdown during the holiday season, which would have absolutely been disastrous for them. Instead, we get these 8 so-called moderate Democrats who think that being reasonable is more important than actually being effective. And I say reasonable with quotes here. This actually is the same mindset that gave us the ACA instead of Medicare for all. And couldn't even give us a $15 minimum wage. Okay? We still have a federal minimum wage of $7.25. It just gives us compromise positions that Republicans end up using to go even further to the right. And of course, the real problem here is these Democrats, they're not actually moderate. They're not actually centrists. They're either afraid of their own shadows or they're paid to lose. Controlled opposition. That lets Republicans walk all over them and then calls it bipartisanship. Obviously, the real winners here are Republicans. They got the government. It's probably going to, they're going to probably reopen the government and didn't have to give up anything substantive on healthcare and can now spend the entirety of December, okay, claiming that, oh, no, we're willing to negotiate, while knowing the Democrats have already shown that they will fold if the pressure gets high enough. Now, for federal workers, this deal does get them back to work, and it promises back pay. That's good. For the millions of Americans who rely on SNAP, the government's going to start operating again. Okay. But for the 20 million Americans who could lose their health care subsidies in December, I mean, nothing's been solved. The promise of a December vote is nice, but it ain't no guarantee. I mean, Mike Johnson, he hasn't even promised that there will be a vote in the House. And given how Republicans have operated for the past 4 years, expecting them to start playing by the rules in December seems optimistic at best. It's kind of like expecting your cat not to knock stuff off the tables. Here's what this actually shows us, okay? The ongoing tension within the Democratic Party between progressives who want to fight and moderates who want to sit there and negotiate. The problem is, when you're fighting against people who've never negotiated in good faith to begin with, your moderates end up being people who just get walked all over on, okay? They lose gracefully instead of actually fighting to win. The progressive position, it's not about trying to be an obstructionist here. It is actually about recognizing that when you have leverage, you freaking use it, okay? When you have public opinion on your side, you push your advantage. When Republicans are on the defensive about healthcare, you do not hand them a victory in exchange for some vague IOUs. So yeah, Newsom was right. He called it a pathetic surrender. Now the question now is whether those 8 Democrats actually do get what they've been promised by Republicans, or whether or not this is just another example of centrist Democrats getting absolutely played by Republicans who never had any intention of negotiating in good faith. And given the track record, I ain't holding my breath. But at least now everyone knows exactly what happened, who voted for what, and why it matters. Because you know what? Sometimes calling a surrender, the first step towards actually winning the war. What is Tim Kaine's deal? Tim Kaine is Tim Kaine. Remember, is the same guy who was picked by Hillary Clinton to be her running mate and got trounced by Trump. I remember calling him out and saying, this man is on a milk carton. Where did he go? What happened to Tim Kaine? Where did he disappear off to? And that's right. These 8 idiots got cuckwalked. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Beta male.
Exactly. So let's move on here. We got a backdoor abortion ban. Awesome. Yay. Republicans are trying to ban abortion without actually banning abortion. Now, congressional Republicans are currently pushing what they are calling a common sense healthcare reform. But what it actually is, of course, is a backdoor nationwide abortion ban. We told you that was coming. And the worst part, of course, they're hiding it in plain sight and disguising it as nothing more than a budget procedure. Now, you have Senate Democrats, including Ron Wyden, are calling this exactly what it is. It is a de facto nationwide abortion ban. But here's the thing. Most Americans don't have any idea that this is happening, which is exactly how Republicans want it, because it would be a very unpopular idea. So here's what they're doing. So Republicans are trying to attach anti-abortion language to the government funding legislation. Specifically, they're demanding that any extension of the ACA subsidies bar tax credits from being used to purchase health insurance plans that cover abortion care. So let me break it down for you, all right? You need health insurance and you want it to cover basic reproductive health care, you might not be able to afford it because they're making it so that the government subsidies that help middle-class families be able to better afford their health insurance cannot be used for plans that include that coverage, abortion coverage. But it actually gets worse. Okay, this is just one of the pieces of a very much larger puzzle that Republicans are simultaneously prohibiting federal funds for abortion care under government health insurance programs, blocking the Department of Defense and the VA from providing abortion services, eliminating Title X family planning funding, and potentially weaponizing the tax code to target reproductive health care organizations by revoking their nonprofit status. So let me be clear, that they're not actually trying to ban abortion outright. That would be politically super unpopular, as I mentioned. But instead, they're making it economically impossible for most people to be able to access abortion while maintaining plausible deniability. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, this sounds kind of familiar, guys. And you're right. You'd be right. This is all part of Project 2025. You know, that 900-page conservative roadmap for dismantling American democracy and instituting authoritarian rule? Yeah. Those abortion restrictions, they're just the beginning. Project 2025, of course, envisions a country where the federal government can control what healthcare decisions you make, what you read online, who you're allowed to vote for, and whether you can even get birth control. And what are the Democrats doing about it? Not a whole lot. I mean, yes, they're denouncing it, sure, but denouncing it isn't going to stop a backdoor ban that could affect millions of American women. And look, I need to say something here that some of you might not want to hear. All right? You might get a little mad at me for this. And that's okay. The Democratic Party, yes, has been warning about this for years. But that's all they've done. They haven't done anything really to stop it. And we could debate whether or not Biden could have done more to protect abortion rights when he had the chance. I would say that he didn't. But that said, the debate's kind of meaningless if we do not focus on what's happening right now. And what's happening right now is Republicans are executing a multi-pronged attack on reproductive freedom, and they're doing it methodically and systematically. Meanwhile, you have too many Democrats that are operating under the assumption that, oh, we just need to win more elections and that would be fine. Okay, but what's going to happen when the playing field is so tilted so far against Democrats that elections don't even matter anymore? And I'm not saying we're at that point yet, but that could be the future. So what do we do first then? Well, first we need to stop pretending this is about compromise or bipartisanship. It's not. Republicans are not interested in compromise. They're interested in control of women's bodies, for example. Second, Democrats need to fight back ruthlessly. That means using every procedural tool available to stop them. It also means going on every media platform to explain exactly what Republicans are doing and how they're doing it. And that means treating this like the emergency, the health emergency that it is. And third, and this is crucial, it's important to organize outside of electoral politics. You can't just focus on elections, guys. If we do, then we're always going to be fighting from behind. We need the movements, protests, boycotts, sustained pressure that makes it politically expensive for Republicans to keep pursuing these disastrous policies. And fourth, we need to be honest about what's at stake here, okay? It's not about just being able to access abortions, although obviously that is critical. This is about whether or not we're going to live in a country where a small group of extreme right-wing ideologues can impose their will on the majority through procedural tricks and backroom deals, okay? The Republican backdoor abortion ban is not a hypothetical thing. It is actually happening now in real time, as we speak. And if we don't stop it, then it's just the beginning of what Project 2025, which is about halfway done, halfway enacted already within the first year. It's just the beginning of what they have planned for our country. Now, the question is, whether Republicans will try to strip away our rights. They're already actually actively doing it. The question is whether or not we're going to sit back or let them, or fight back with everything we've got. Because I don't know about you, but I am rather tired of living in a country where the government, under these people, thinks it can make the healthcare decisions for half the population while hiding behind these procedural technicalities. This is our fight. And if we lose, I don't think we're going to have much of a country left to save. Okay. VMan29397 with a very kind $10 super chat says, on the bright side, the Supreme Court refused to review the gay marriage case. Also, it seems Puerto Rico's ruling right-wing party is in the midst of a schism, and it may cost them the 2028 election. True. Great that Kim Davis just got knocked down. That's awesome and hilarious. And hey, also great to see that, the right-wingers in Puerto Rico had a bad day, are having a bad day. The general prescription for all this greed was laid out in the Powell Memo, I believe, around 1970. I do remember the Powell Memo. And of course, you also had, again, this kind of goes back to Ronald Reagan's time, and also Richard Nixon, all that moral majority stuff, the change to the Southern strategy, obviously used by Nixon, and all that stuff. Yeah. Oh, and the Supreme Court cases also that made money in politics, just allowed the flood of money to come in and take over our politics. And so all that stuff related. What's worth saving? The people. The people. Okay. Let's move on. Yeah, we got a person who fell for it again and is not happy about it. Another Trump voter is admitting they got played. Now, this is not coming from TDS, liberals, or anything like that. No, this is coming straight from the MAGA guys himself, a self-described enthusiastic libertarian Trump voter. Okay. Now, recently, this Trump voter named, get this, Morgan Morgus, which kind of feels like it's a fake name, honestly. But anyway, in this article in USA Today, they wrote, and I'm quoting here, quote, after a year after the presidential election, I feel completely swindled. Oh, do you? So just let that sink in for a second, okay? This is not some deep state conspiracy liberal media hit job, okay? No, this is somebody who enthusiastically voted for this guy, saying that, oh, I feel swindled. And get this, they said if the same candidate ran again, if Trump ran again, they just sit out the election completely. Huh? No, well, that's what we call a ring endorsement for the Trump camp. Now, what makes this, of course, deliciously ironic, Morgus identifies, as I mentioned, a libertarian. This is supposed to be the people who want government. Get out of my wallet. Get out of my life. Get out of my bedroom. And look, the libertarians traditionally hate both parties, right? But especially hate anything that looks like big government or corruption, okay? A libertarian voting for Trump, I guess, kind of makes sense on paper when you think about it. Trump's whole campaign was about, I'm going to drain the swamp, right? Reduce regulation, get rid of the regulations, cut taxes. The government that governs best governs least, But, of course, Trump has actually delivered something completely different than what he promised. And that's exactly why this libertarian voter, I guess, apparently feels like they got punked by the biggest con artist in political history. Remember, Trump talked a big game about cutting the federal government, right? I mean, Doge, another great example of that. But what did we actually get? We got a massive expansion of federal power concentrated in the executive branch, continuing the policies that drive up government spending, like more defense, and here's the kicker, Trump becoming something that, that he claimed to have hated. A big, bloated, inefficient government operation that serves only the donors. Oops. Now, Morgus put it more bluntly in his letter to USA Today. He said that Trump's conduct amounts to a, quote, complete betrayal of their vote. Again, not exactly vague disappointment here. Somebody saying that they were sold a bill of goods, and now they're stuck with it, while Trump and his billionaire friends laugh all the way to the bank. Now, he specifically mentioned that, hoping that Trump would be, quote, willing to listen to us. Right. Okay. Yeah. Look, the people thought that they were voting for an outsider who would actually represent them instead of the donors, but of course, Trump does nothing but represent himself and his donors. Okay? They got the same old political elite bullshit who ignores their concerns unless it serves their own agenda or their billionaire benefactors' bank accounts. That's the reality. I mean, think about this too from a libertarian perspective, right? You vote for the guy who promises to get government out of your life, and then suddenly you get somebody who expands federal power in ways that made George W. Bush and the late Dick Cheney blush. If you're a libertarian who votes for Trump based on small government promises, yeah, makes sense that you'd feel like you got conned by the world's most obvious grifter. Now, the article also highlights another Trump supporter who was mad about Trump's handling of SNAP funding. You know, he tried to stop people from getting their food stamps, okay? Their food assistance during the holidays. I mean, how evil do you have to be? Okay? Pretty goddamn evil, okay? Again, for 40 plus million Americans. This voter pointed out that while Trump was investing in expensive White House renovations, i.e. the ballroom that cost about $300 million, while he was getting that all put together, he was also simultaneously cutting food assistance to the most vulnerable Americans, including troops. Now, here's the thing. As a progressive, I'm going to have problems with libertarians, okay? And I'm also obviously going to have problems with the way that Trump handled food assistance, right? But if you're a libertarian, right, I understand why you'd be furious. Libertarians, they say they're not exactly against helping people. They just want private industry to do it. Private charity, local programs. They don't want the federal government involved, right? Now, obviously, I'm going to disagree with that. It doesn't work. But Trump didn't even deliver on that promise, okay? Or any promises that small government. He just cut federal programs willy-nilly, man, while spending lavishly on his own comfort and that of his wealthy friends. And that's the problem. That's not small government, man. That is government that benefits the wealthy while hurting the poor and middle class. What's left of the middle class. Okay. And this isn't an isolated incident either. We're seeing a pattern here. All right. That Trump's own voters, supporters are like, I'm also starting to notice this. Kind of feels like I've been had worse than a used car, car salesman in Miami. Like, that's not so good. I mean, you got these voters who thought that they were voting for like an outsider or something. Somebody who'd stick it to the establishment. But instead, they got somebody who embodies the worst of the establishment, but with worse hair, and who falls asleep during cabinet meetings. Just saying. Look, the promise was there. Yeah, and true, he hasn't used that in a while. Drain the swamp, right? But most recently with Doge. We're going to cut the government waste. We're going to reduce the deficit. We're going to cut the budget, man. We're going to focus on affordability. And what they got instead was somebody who expanded federal power, ICE, for example, when it benefited him and his wealthy donors, while cutting essential services when it hurt the most vulnerable, while he talked about fiscal responsibility, while running up massive deficits, and promised to fight for working Americans while implementing policies that primarily benefited himself and his donors. I mean, they're watching a con artist in action. And then the mark of that con starts to realize, oh no, I've been had. Because the promises do not match the reality. And of course, we warned you about that. And look, again, we warned you. We warned you. Okay. Now, what this tells us about Trump voters is actually pretty important as well. Okay. Look, I've even kind of talked about this. The narrative here that anybody who's voted for Donald Trump is either a racist or a fascist or an idiot who got duped. I think that's still mostly right, but you do have Trump voters, some Trump voters, who actually looked at his policy and were like, yeah, I've got legitimate policy concerns. That's why I'm going to vote for Trump, right? They wanted small government. They wanted, less corruption, obviously, and we all want less corruption. Actual representation. What did Trump do? He exploited those things, exploited those concerns in order to get their vote while having absolutely no intention of following through, which again, I warned you about that. Morgan Morgus isn't upset because he thinks Trump was too conservative. He's upset because Trump wasn't conservative enough on the issues that matters to him, right? Or them. Didn't deliver on the small government promises. He got bigger government. He didn't cut spending. Didn't reduce the power of the federal government. He grew it. He just gave the same old Republican policies with extra corruption and incompetence thrown in. Okay? That's it. This is actually a case where political reality confirms what people like myself, progressive critics, have been saying for years. Trump talked a big game about being different while governing like a typical Republican who expands federal power when it's convenient and cuts it when it serves him or his donors' interests. And what we've seen here is a difference between the campaign promises and the governing reality. Trump ran on being a business outsider who would bring efficiency to the government. Instead, he brought out the worst of both worlds, political corruption of traditional politicians with the absolute incompetent management style of a reality TV show that got canceled after a single season. Yeah. Now, again, the irony is that while progressive critics have been saying that Trump is a fraud for years, I know I have, even his own voters are starting to come to the same conclusion. But unlike progressives who saw through his con from day one, these voters actually bought into it. And now they're dealing with the harsh reality of having some buyer's remorse. Now, here's what this really represents, though. The moment when the mask finally slips off and people see Trump for what he is. And look, this isn't about partisan politics anymore, okay? This is about voters who supported this guy based on specific policy promises, feeling absolutely betrayed because those promises were never intended to be kept. Morgan said it best, that they feel completely swindled. Not the language of someone who disagrees with the policy outcomes. That's the language of somebody who realizes they have been conned by a master grifter who had never had any intention of delivering what he had promised. Now the question is now whether more Trump voters will follow this or, and realize that they got played, or whether they'll double down on the sunk cost fallacy and continue to support someone who has proven over and over again that he does not give a damn about any of them. Once again, I don't care about you. I just need your vote. And there you are. Moving on here. Oh boy. And here we go. Disastrous. Time to talk about Donald Trump's latest housing policy brainchild. The 50-year mortgage. Wow. That's just such a stupid idea that I could hardly even express it properly, okay? Housing experts are absolutely demolishing this new idea as spectacularly dumb.
Stupid.
So the president is receiving backlash to yet another one of his half-baked policy proposals that probably was just like, I don't know, he probably came up with it in the middle of the night during one of his like Diet Coke drinking binges at 3 a.m. I mean, oh yeah, no, it sounds good if you don't think about it for more than like 30 seconds. Oh wow, extending the mortgages to 50 years, that'll be great. Except no, it actually wouldn't be great. And I'll go over the details here as to why. Now, let me give you some details first. The Federal Housing Finance Agency under Director Bill Pult has been floating this 50-year-old mortgage concept as some sort of game changer for housing affordability. Spoiler alert, of course, it's neither a game changer nor is it going to make housing any more affordable for regular people. So here's the Trump administration's brilliant solution to the housing crisis. Instead of making homes more affordable, let's just make people pay for them longer. Wow. Wow. Whoa, wow. Holy crap. No. Instead of the traditional 30-year mortgage, you'd stretch it out to 50 years. On the surface, oh, it might sound good, right? Lower monthly payments. But no, this is offering someone a longer car loan to make the monthly payment more affordable, yes, while ignoring the fact that they will pay thousands more in interest over time. It is the kind of solution that only really works if you believe making car payments for half a century somehow, house payments for more than half a century somehow makes you more of a homeowner than a debt slave. I mean, this is bad. This is really ridiculous. Housing experts obviously immediately called it what it is, a disaster waiting to happen. Because we're talking about people potentially making mortgage payments all the way into their 80s and 90s. Remember, I think that around the average age of somebody getting a home now is in their 40s, okay? And so, yeah, 50-year mortgage, you're going to be 90 when you have that sucker paid off. Although most likely you'll be dead. I mean, because the average life expectancy in the United States is actually decreasing. Not good. Not good at all. Okay? Look, they would also, by the way, pay more in interest than the actual value of their homes. And of course, this would have the effect of creating a generation of Americans that are trapped into debt for life. They're just trying to figure out ways to trap people in debt forever. Forever and ever. Now, the online reaction, of course, to Trump's 50-year mortgage proposal has been pretty brutal and well-deserved. Okay, critics are calling it spectacularly dumb, and they're not wrong. And here's the irony, right? Trump built his entire political brand on being the real estate genius, okay? And the man who wrote The Art of the Deal, which he didn't actually write. And now is proposing housing policy that is so obviously terrible that the most basic of math shows that this is a disaster waiting to happen. Look, if you extend out these loans, then you're going to end up having higher interest rates. Simple as that. So, because it's more risk. So now you extend these loans, right? And you're paying interest for an additional 20 years. So you're going to end up paying more for the home than it is actually worth. That is not making housing more affordable. It's making it more expensive while pretending otherwise. And here's where it gets more interesting, right? So, as I mentioned, the FHFA director, Bill Pulte, right? He has been promoting this as a potential solution for our affordability problem for houses. Pulte apparently thinks that extending debt for half a century is a game changer. Same guy that oversees the federal housing finance policy. The fact that this is coming from that agency, which is supposed to be protecting consumers and ensuring housing stability, tells you everything you need to know about how disconnected these people are from the reality of American homeownership. While Trump and his team are busy proposing ridiculous 50-year mortgages, they're ignoring the actual causes of housing unaffordability, which again, you have corporate speculation, obviously, lack of affordable housing. Okay, you got people that are investors that are snapping up these homes, zoning restrictions as well that do prevent dense housing development, and policies that favor investors over first-time home buyers. A 50-year mortgage is not going to solve any of these problems. It just makes your debt last longer, while the underlying issues get worse. You are putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound and saying, all fixed up, you're good to go. No, you're not. Look, the real solutions to housing affordability, of course, involving addressing things like supply and demand. You regulate corporate speculation. You get private investors out of the market, build more affordable housing, obviously, and implement policies that actually help working people buy homes instead of just making people debt slaves for the rest of their lives. I mean, this mortgage proposal is not about solving housing problems. It's about creating a political talking point that sounds good to people who do not think beyond their monthly payments, which it will slightly decrease. Trump will get to say that he's doing something about it, without actually doing something about it. The same playbook that Trump uses on everything, okay? Announcing a flashy solution that sounds, ooh, impressive. Oh, wow, look at that. While ignoring the experts who explain why it's terrible and hope that the soundbite is more powerful than the actual substance. Meanwhile, the actual problems get worse and worse while politicians grandstand about superficial fixes. The 50-year mortgage is particularly cynical because it does exploit people's desperation to own a home by offering what appears to be relief, but is actually just extending the pain over a longer period of time. Here's what it actually means. It creates a generation of Americans who will make mortgage payments well into their retirement. Of course, there's a lot of people like myself that say, what retirement? I ain't never going to retire. I'll probably die on the job. Okay? Most people don't have a plan to retire. Most people are just like, I don't know, I'm just going to die at my desk or something. Just, you're going to have to haul me out of the office, my corpse, like you're a Democratic politician. I know, low blow, but it's true. It is true. Look, they're not going to be able to build their wealth through their home equity either because they're paying so much in interest right now. They're going to end up leaving some of that debt to their kids. It's not home ownership, it's debt ownership. And it's going to create a society where people are permanently indebted to the banks and financial institutions, where the American dream of owning a home, free and clear, becomes impossible for most people. Look, I know Republicans, they claim to be a lot of things, right? They claim to believe in individual responsibility and limited government, right? And yet that same party is pretty eager to create a system that traps people in debt for life while enriching the financial industry. The real solutions, of course, to housing affordability are pretty straightforward, as I mentioned before, but they would actually require, governing, making difficult decisions that may upset the wealthy donors and the corporate interests. So that's why it's much easier to propose a flashy 50-year mortgage that sounds good on paper or campaign ad while ignoring that it actually makes the underlying problems worse. The housing affordability crisis is real. It needs actual real solutions based on evidence and expertise, not promises that sound good if you're unable to do basic math. Yeah. Oy. All right. Moving on here. Last story. This is yeah. I saved the most infuriating for last. Okay. Moving on here.
This is what ICE does. This is what these terrorists do to babies.
Mama, you okay, Mama? You okay? You okay, Mama? You okay, Mama?
So that right there is something that should absolutely make everyone's blood boil. What was that? Well, in Cicero, Illinois, Customs and Border Protection decided to terrorize a family with a baby in the car. In just what is the latest example of what happens when you give militarized agencies carte blanche to operate on American soil with no accountability. And yes, I said militarized because that's exactly what they are. That's what DHS and Border Patrol have become under the Trump regime. So I'm going to give you an example of what happened, right? According to the Daily Beast, Rafael Veraza and Evelyn Herrera were driving home from a Sam's Club with their 1-year-old daughter, Ariana Sofia, in the car. Now, note that they weren't protesting, they weren't causing any trouble, they weren't doing anything. They were just existing while brown in America, and apparently that is a crime. Too much for Customs and Border Patrol, okay? And their commander, Gregory Bavino, and his goons. So you had a federal officer in a black vehicle, okay, and I want you to picture this, shooting pepper spray directly into the window of their car on the road where there's a baby, a 1-year-old, got pepper sprayed in the face by federal agents. That's insanity. Now, of course, DHS has an excuse, right? Oh, no, our agents were being stalked, everybody, in the parking lot. What? Stalked? They were coming back from grocery shopping. That's not stalking. No, that's called being followed by paranoid agents who see threats where none exist. And get this, DHS, they made 9 arrests that day. 8 of them were U.S. citizens. 8 American citizens arrested for what? Existing while Latino in the wrong place at the wrong time. That's what's going on. But again, this is not an isolated incident. No, it's what happens when you normalize treating entire communities as if they are enemy combatants. When you give agencies like DHS and Border Patrol the green light to operate like occupying forces in American cities. Now think about what this represents. We've got federal agents who think it's totally fine and appropriate to pepper spray a baby because they got their feelings hurt about being allegedly stalked by a grocery shopping trip. These are the same agencies that have been deployed against protesters, against journalists, against anyone who dares to speak out against this administration. And let's be clear, right? This wasn't even about immigration enforcement. This family wasn't on their radar. They weren't targets. According to the report, neither parent is an immigration target. So what was this about? Sending a message about making sure that brown-skinned Americans know that they could be terrorized at any moment for any reason by federal agents who will face zero consequences for their actions. Now, here's where I am going to have to address something that some of you might not want to hear. This is not just a problem that started with Trump. Yes, it's what happens when you militarize immigration enforcement and give DHS and other agencies like it unlimited power to operate on American soil. The infrastructure for this abuse was built long before Trump had taken office. Remember, DHS was created after 9/11 to try to keep us safe. Of course, they haven't. Okay. What it has done is, well, create a massive surveillance apparatus. And there's a lot of corporations that are, involved in that. Palantir being one of them. that's primarily used to terrorize immigrants and communities of color. But I remember Muslims in New York being profiled and being spied on long before Trump got into office. Okay? And so, look, this has been a long-standing problem. And since then, by the way, Border Patrol, since its creation, Border Patrol and ICE have been getting increased levels of funding. And as a result, of course, you had deportations that increased. Look, under Obama, there's a reason Barack Obama was called the deporter-in-chief. Okay? And of course, under the Biden administration actually had deported more people than the first Trump administration. Okay? And that said, they weren't quite as brutal under those administrations, but definitely more brutal under Trump. And Trump, thanks to Republicans, the big beautiful bill, they massively got funded. Okay? I mean, that bill gave them more money than the entire militaries of smaller countries. Okay? And Trump has said, go ahead and be as brutal as possible. Trump, Stephen Miller. Okay? So now, what do? Well, first, we got to stop pretending that this is about law and order. It ain't. Law and order isn't pepper spraying babies in the face. This is about authoritarianism. And it's right here. It's happening right in plain sight. Secondly, as soon as we get a chance, defund and militarize. So, look, again, we have militarized these agencies. We got to get rid of that. Okay? We must defund ICE. We must demilitarize the police and these agencies. DHS, Border Patrol, ICE. They're not keeping us safe. It's true. They're creating a climate of fear that serves no one except for those who want to maintain power, their power through intimidation. And third, we need accountability. Okay? Gregory Bovino and every agent involved in this incident should face criminal charges. A 1-year-old baby was chemically burned by federal agents. Why is that not a federal crime? That should be prosecuted as such. And again, finally, we need to stop treating this as if it's a partisan left versus right issue. It's not. It's about whether we live in a country where federal agents can terrorize families with impunity. Now, I understand, too, that this is exhausting. I know it's absolutely overwhelming to keep track of all the ways that this administration, this regime, and its agencies are attacking our communities. I know, but stories like this, where you have a baby that was pepper sprayed while her family was coming home from a grocery shopping trip, this is what authoritarianism looks like in practice. Look, we're not at concentration camps or well, actually we are. We are at the concentration camps and mass deportations. But authoritarianism also looks like this, okay? About a family trying to live their lives, okay? When federal agents decide that, yes, they need to be taught a lesson about who really has power in this country. That's what the federal agents have decided that they want to do. Ariana Sophia is going to grow up knowing that the U.S. government thought it was appropriate to shoot her in the face with chemicals because her parents had the audacity to exist while being Latino in America. That should horrify everyone, regardless of their political party. Now, the question is, of course, are we going to keep accepting this as normal? Or are we going to start demanding better? Because I, for one, am pretty tired of living in a country where babies get pepper sprayed by federal agents. And the response is, well, they were up to something. No, it's not justice. It's not safety. It's fascism. And it's happening right in front of our eyes. Okay. Pat, this is the first time I'm hearing about the baby. Of course, it's not being talked about. I'm talking about it. And I'm sure others will as well, because it's just horrific. Horrific. Best movie you can make is to buy an affordable house and pay it off as fast as you can. Since 2021, though, housing has just gone way up to where it's now very, very unaffordable. Very unaffordable. Why isn't that better than paying rent until you die? Okay. Paying rent until you die, also a terrible thing. All right? The overall point here, though, is that we have an affordability crisis when it comes to homes. Homes are so unaffordable now, and we need to actually fix that. And this 50-year mortgage doesn't do that. And that's the important point that I was trying to get across. Because both of these are terrible things, and we do need to fix it. Except that right now we're not. He's just putting out like ridiculous ideas, just throwing those out there that aren't going to really help anyone except for the bankers. All right. With that said, everybody, if you haven't already, please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Helps us out greatly. If you haven't already, also be a subscriber. All right, subscribe to the channel. All right, very important that you do so as well. And click the bell icon if you want to keep, seeing my videos pop up. Because the algorithm is kind of crappy right now. And so there you go. Real estate is a scam and they are overpriced. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, there is not enough affordable housing. And unfortunately, no one really cares. All right. But anyway, thank you for watching the show. Please like and share. Consider, being a subscriber and signing up to support the show. That's patreon.com/jeffwaldorf. If you haven't already signed up for that, or become a channel member by hitting the join button below. With that said, thank you all. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, everybody. Be back here tomorrow. Same time, same place.